Hi, my name is Sharice Nolan and I'm with St. Tammany Parish Public Schools. Today we're going to look at energy flow and ecosystems, so if you would, give me a moment and we'll go ahead and get things moving. Energy flow through ecosystems. All living organisms require energy to power life processes such as growth and reproduction. But where does the energy come from? Energy cannot be created or destroyed, just transferred. So where does all the living organisms get the energy required to carry out life processes? All the energy on Earth ultimately comes from the sun. Well, what organisms can use the energy from the sun and obtain energy? Those organisms are known as producers. Producers, also known as autotrophs, capture energy from non-living sources and convert it into usable forms for all living organisms. The type of producers that we are going to focus on are called photoautotrophs, meaning they use the light energy from the sun to convert it into a usable energy form. So our photoautotrophs include our plants, algae like the algae floating on the water right here, as well as some bacteria. So these organisms, these photoautotrophs, are able to capture the energy from the sun as well as carbon dioxide and water from the environment and build high energy molecules that then allows them to carry out life processes for themselves. What is it called though? What is that process called in which the energy from the sun is captured and used to build high energy molecules? That process is called photosynthesis. Through the process of photosynthesis, these photoautotrophs, all of our plants, some bacteria, and algae, are able to capture the energy from the sun as well as utilizing carbon dioxide and water from the environment and build carbohydrate molecules, and they release oxygen as a waste product. The chemical formula for photosynthesis is 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters yields 1 glucose molecule. By the way, glucose is sugar, and 6 oxygen molecules. So in word form, carbon dioxide and water yields glucose. Again, glucose is nothing more than sugar, and oxygen. Okay, so now we know where our producers get their energy from. But what about all other organisms who are not producers? Where do they get their energy from, and who are they? Those organisms that are not capable of photosynthesis are known as our consumers. Consumers would be all organisms in kingdom Animalia, as well as all organisms in the fungus kingdom, as well as some other organisms in the bacteria kingdoms and the protist kingdom. Here we have different types of consumers. We have carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. And as well as we can see some bacteria right here, and this mushroom is a fungus. Well, all of these are examples of consumers. They rely on other organisms for energy and nutrients, meaning they cannot absorb the energy from the sun and use it to build these high energy carbohydrate molecules. So they must obtain them from other organisms. Hence, they are known as consumers. They must consume other organisms to obtain the energy they need to carry out life processes. So to summarize, autotrophs are organisms that can take in inorganic substances such as carbon dioxide and water from the environment and utilize light energy to synthesize food. Heterotrophs, known as our consumers, are not capable of taking in the inorganic compounds and light energy from the sun to build these high energy food molecules. So heterotrophs are our consumers. They must intake and digest the substances that the autotrophs make and use that energy to carry out their own life processes. If we're going to track the flow of energy, we can go ahead and look at a food chain. A food chain is a series of organisms in which energy is transferred from one organism to another. If you look at the beginning of the food chain, we have the producer. All food chains start with producers because, again, the producers are the only organisms that can take energy from the surroundings and use that energy to build high energy molecules that can be used to carry out life processes. So how does the energy transfer? Well, energy is transferred from this plant to the insect when the insect eats the plant. Then the energy is transferred to the mouse when the mouse eats the insect, and the energy is transferred to the owl when the owl eats the mouse. If you look, energy flows in one direction in food chains, from the producers to the various consumers. Also, if you take a look at the direction that the arrow is pointing. The arrows point in the direction of the energy flow. Again, energy flow always starts at the producer level because they're the only organisms that are able to take the energy from the environment and use that energy as well as other inorganic compounds to build high energy life molecules that all life processes can occur. We've just looked at food chains. Now let's look at a food web. A food web is composed of many interacting food chains and shows various ways in which matter and energy can flow through an ecosystem. Here we see again many different food chains. The tree passes on energy to the grasshopper, that passes on energy to the bird, that transfers the energy to the cougar right here. Or you can say the energy from the tree is transferred directly to this bird, and then the bird directly to the cougar. Oh, let me go back real quick. So a food web is much more realistic than a food chain because it shows the various different ways that energy can flow through an ecosystem. Again, just like food chains, food webs always start off at the producer level right here before moving on. Both food chains and food webs can be looked at in an ecological pyramid. An ecological pyramid is used to look at the relative amount of matter or energy within each trophic level in an ecosystem. So if you take a look at this ecological pyramid that we have right here, just like food chains and food webs, you always start off with producers. Producers are again the only organisms that can take in energy from their surroundings and use it to build high energy organic molecules in which they themselves, as well as all other organisms, the consumers, need to carry out life processes. So if you notice, the bottom level is much larger than the subsequent levels directly above it. So here we have our first trophic level, which is our producers, always going to be our producers at the base. And then directly above it, we have our first order consumers, which is our second trophic level. And then above it, we have our second order consumers. And then finally, our third order consumers in this particular pyramid. So in this particular pyramid, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different trophic levels. Again, starting with the producer at the first trophic level. Second trophic level being our herbivores that directly feed on those producers. Above it is our second order consumers, which traditionally consist of omnivores as well as small carnivores. And then directly above the second order consumers, we have in this case, this third order consumer. The third order consumer can also be an omnivore, or they could be our carnivores, or top level in the food chain or food web. So energy flow. So now let's take a look at the energy flow that occurs in the different trophic levels. Well, the rule of energy flow in ecosystems is 10%. Only 10% of the energy available at any one trophic level transfers to the level directly above it. Let me say that again. Only 10% of the energy at any one trophic level is capable of transferring to the level directly above it. This is why you always have to have more organisms at the bottom than you do at the top. And as you move up the different trophic levels, the number of organisms must decrease. Because again, only 10% of that energy transfers. So, according to the 10% rule, say, for instance, if we start off with 1,000 units of energy at the producer level, following the 10% rule of the 1,000 units of energy, only 100 units of energy is going to transfer to the next level above it. Or now this level, with its 100 units of energy, only 10% of that energy is going to transfer to the level directly above it, giving that level only 10 units of energy. And then finally, the energy that's in this second order consumer level, again, only 10% is available to this level right here, this tertiary level. So of those 10 units of energy, only 1 unit of energy is going to be made available to this level. So we started with 1,000 units of energy, and because only 10% of that energy can transfer to the trophic level directly above it, we went from 1,000 units of energy right here to only 100 units of energy being available at this first order consumer level. 10 units of energy is available at the second order consumer level, and only 1 unit of energy is available at that third order consumer level. Again, this is why the number of organisms, or the amount of matter or mass that's found at any one trophic level, must decrease as you move up. So traditionally, by the time you get all the way up to the highest trophic level in any food chain or food web, you have so very few organisms. Review. What is the ultimate source of energy on Earth? The sun. Remember, producers such as plants convert sunlight into chemical energy. So no, plants are not the ultimate source of energy. The ultimate source of energy is the sun, but it's the producers that can utilize that energy and capture that energy into a high energy molecule known as glucose. Question 2. Which group of organisms is always found at the base of a food chain or food web? The primary producers, such as plants, algae, as well as some bacteria. What happens to energy as it moves up an ecological pyramid? Keep in mind that ecological pyramids always start off at the producer level. So what happens to the energy as it moves up? It decreases. Remember, only 10% of the energy in a trophic level is transferred to the level directly above it. This is why the number of organisms must decrease as you move up. And finally, the last question. Assuming this plant right here has 100% energy available, what percentage of that plant's energy will the insect be able to utilize? The mouse and the owl. Remember, only 10% of the energy transfers. So if there's 100% energy here, we're only going to have 10% here to the insect level, 1% energy available to the mouse level, and 0.1%